when you start decorating cakes, an important thing to consider is what you're going to put your cake on. Now, there are several options. You could use different types of cake plates. You can use cake boards such as this one. This is just a 6-inch gold board. You can still see the corrugation from the sides. You can buy drums from specialty supply stores. I like to make my own custom cake boards, something like this. The nice thing about making your own cake boards is you can really customize them to the design of the final cake. So for this, in this course, I'm going to be demonstrating a cake with a lot of blues in it. So this will go really well with the design. And then you can choose a ribbon that's complementary as well. And this also has a nice cake board on the bottom, which will allow you to be able to pick up your cake and transport it and move it easier. So I'm going to show you how to make this. And I'm using scrapbook paper. Now, if you go to a craft supply store, you can pick up all different kinds of sheets of scrapbook paper. And if you prefer to keep your boards really neutral, which is totally fine, especially if you're doing a wedding cake, I would recommend something more neutral. But for celebration cakes, and sometimes for cakes that are really muted, or maybe it's an all-white cake or something like that, sometimes I like to play around and throw a little design on the board, which is really fun. So these sheets are 12 by 12. Now, you can cover up to a 10-inch cake board with these sheets. If you're creating a base that's going to be larger than 10 inches, you can also purchase wrapping paper. Different designs will go really nicely, and you can even just buy, one color or shiny wrapping paper, or even something to match the theme of a birthday party would be really fun as well. Now, I also have just some regular cake boards. The cake that I'm going to be making has a 7-inch base. So I'm doing a 9-inch custom board, and that's going to give me enough space around the edges where you're just going to see maybe 1.5 inches or 1 inch around the edges really of this board. It's not a lot. You're not going to see all of this. That's something to keep in mind too. Now I'm starting out with 3 9-inch boards. These are really inexpensive, so that's another thing to think about, because this might be a little bit of work, but fairly inexpensive compared to buying, say, a whole cake plate or a custom board for a cake. You could just make your own. And for smaller cakes, I use 3 of these. For much larger cakes, you might want to use 4 or 5 just to make sure that you have enough stability to move it around. And then I have just a little 6-inch, like I said, for the base. You're going to need tape, scissors. I have ribbon, and you want to make sure the width of your ribbon is about how tall your cake boards are going to be when they're stacked. So I have a 5/8 of an inch, and when I put my boards together, it just barely comes up over the edge. So with this board on the bottom and the paper, it's all going to work out to where the ribbon's going to nicely cover the sides and give it a really finished look. And then I also have just some Elmer's school glue, and I like using this because it's non-toxic and you're going to be using it around cakes. And then finally, plastic wrap, because you cannot put a cake directly on wrapping paper or these sheets. You have to make sure that you have a food safe surface. So this has a really nice stretch layer of plastic wrap over it to make it a food safe surface. So to get started, you're just going to start out with one of your boards, and you're putting it right in the middle of the paper. And all I'm going to do is just kind of roughly cut off around the edges, because I don't want all of this excess to work with. And this doesn't have to be a really nice clean cut because this is going to be covered up on the back of this board when all's said and done. So I know this is going to be the general top. So I'm going to flip this over and then flip the side that's going to be visible, lay that down. And then I want to have my tape handy. And if you have a tape dispenser where you could just pull it off and go, then that'll probably help a lot more. But I've gotten used to doing it with this. So what you're doing basically is you're going to be wrapping this paper as snugly as possible around the board without tearing it. So when you're looking at wrapping paper and scrapbook paper, don't get something that's really thick and stiff because you're going to need to be able to still bend it and get it to wrap nicely and pleat around the edge of this. So a really thick paper, it's not going to do that. And you don't want a really thin paper either because it's going to rip more easily and you might want to pull your hair out. So to get started, I'm starting by pulling over one spot really tightly. And you always want to keep pressure down on the top of the board just because that's going to keep it from sliding around. And then as you're holding that, you're taking your other hand and you're pulling down right next to it to get it nice and snug and curved. And then you're just going to push that pleat down. And you're going to keep holding it. And the natural curve of the board will kind of tell you where you need to start pulling. You wouldn't want to pull out here because then you're going to have, it's not going to be a nice curved pleat. So they're not going to be too far apart. So once you have a few of those done, you just want to take your tape and tape down the back part of it. You don't want to tape here because you're still working with this part, but just tape down these back pleats and then you don't have to hold them down anymore. And then you just keep working your way the whole way around the board. Once you get to the end, it can seem a little tricky, but your pleats will go together, so don't worry about that. Just kind of push it down to get it snug. But I like to leave a longer portion untaped just to make sure that I'm going to get a nice wrap the whole way around when I'm getting to the end. Tape that down. There we go. And there you can see it's just a really nice snug fit. I just like to kind of go around the edge a little bit and push down any little points that might be sticking out, kind of smooth them out. And then that's going to be the top pattern. So after that, you want to cover it in your plastic wrap, being really careful not to get it stuck together because we want a really nice smooth layer, no wrinkles. Just going to put this face down again. And then I like to pull from opposite sides. Kind of stick those together just to get it started. And then I'm going to start pulling the plastic wrap around much in the same fashion kind of pleating it and gathering it together like I did with the paper, trying to pull it nice and snug, but not tear it. Once you kind of have one side, you can tape some of those pieces down. And you can just kind of flip it over and check it and pull and see where you need to fix anything. You can see this part needs to be a little bit tighter. Okay, so I'm looking at it kind of from the side, and there's no wrinkles in the top, so I'm really happy with that. Okay, and then the next part is we're going to start gluing our other boards onto that. So really simply, put enough glue on there that it's going to stick but not come out the sides. And it doesn't matter if you put this white side up or brown side up, you just want to make sure that they're nice and lined up the whole way around. And then you can see that nobody sees that, you know, plastic wrap and paper part. And that's the middle board. And then for the bottom board, I do like to have the white side facing down in case anybody would flip it over. This side's nicer than that side, so. And yes, this Elmer's glue does hold it all together. It doesn't come apart. It's not as strong as other glues, but it still works. And then I like to take a look at my sides because you can see on different sides which way the corrugation goes. So I can look and see that it's going this way. So then I want to look at this board and put it the opposite way. So those sections of corrugation are crossing each other, and it's actually going to give it more of a sturdiness. There's that direction. There we go. Make sure they're lined up. And then lastly, I'm going to take my nice little smaller board and attach that, the nice side being visible, right in the middle. And again, I mentioned that this just gives you the tiniest bit of room to be able to slide your fingers underneath and be able to pick up and move your whole cake a lot easier. It's nice to let these sit and dry for a little bit just so it's easier to get the ribbon on. They're not sliding around on you. And for your ribbon, like I mentioned, you want it to be the height of your boards. And this, standing on its edge, is the perfect height for 3 boards together. And you want to choose a color of ribbon that's complementary. I just like this kind of off-white color because it pretty much goes with anything almost. You want to start out by cutting off the end of your ribbon just as straight as possible. Give you a nice edge to start with. We're going to be applying this around the edges. So you want to pull out enough ribbon to get you going, and it's going to go right here on the top edge. And I only put it here at the top edge because if you put it the whole way down, the ribbon can kind of stick funny and it'll create a ripple in your ribbon. But we're just doing a really small amount, wiping anything that might get on the top. And you're just going to line the ribbon right up and stick it around the side there. Now, if you want to use hot glue for this part, you can, because you won't be able to see the hot glue through the ribbon as much. But I find that just having Elmer's glue works for the whole project. And then you're just going to continue the whole way around. Just like that. Then when you get to the end, just put a small dot right at the end. Cut that straight down. It'll overlap, and then that can just be the back of your cake when you put it on the board. And if you have any bits of glue sticking up, you can wipe those away with a paper towel, but wipe them outwards. You don't want to wipe glue in across your board because you'll be able to see that on the plastic wrap when the light hits it. Then you can just, if you have to readjust any of the ribbon once it's all the way on there, go ahead and do that. Make sure it's attached the whole way around, that you don't have any gaps, but if you pull the paper and pleated it properly, it should have a nice snug fit. And that's the cake board. Just leave it to dry on a flat surface. I usually do my cake boards a couple days ahead of time, and then that way it has plenty of time for the glue to dry and be ready to go. But that is how you make your own custom designed cake boards.